Oh, welcome to another great edition of Cocktails with Cav, where we bring the author meet and greet to you. Maybe even find your next great read. Well, I survived the hurricane here in New Orleans last week, so I'm back. Woke up this morning. I hope everybody's having a great Monday. Carpe diem, loosely translated from the Latin. I think that means kick the week's butt. So, well, anyway, please, a little bit of housekeeping. Check the links in the description. Please consider supporting the show. Cheap cup of coffee is all it takes at our Buy Me a Coffee link, as well as check out our merch page. Got a lot of great swag, great way to support the show, and we're adding more every day. Well, I tell you what, we have an incredible guest, an author from the remote, rugged mountains, Blue Mountains of New South Wales down in Australia. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to it. Help me welcome to the stage the great author, Alan Whelan. Oh, Alan, my friend, coming to us from the land down under. I'm so glad we're finally able to get you on the show, bud. How are you?
I'm fantastic, George. Life is good up here in the mountains. It's cold. In your honor, I'm drinking a orange screwdriver. So at 10 in the morning.
I like it.
But you know, I'm a New Zealander in Australia, and we New Zealanders are tough, so we can cope with anything.
Even day drinking. No.
Yeah, even that. Yeah. I'll probably have some coffee afterwards. But
that's right. Well, that's good to. You got to pace yourself, buddy. You have to pace yourself.
Right.
But man, I tell you, Alan, we had such a time getting you on the show. But I am so glad you're finally here, and you know, we really love the audience to get to know the creators. And you know, we'll definitely talk about your great work. That I discovered you looking over your work, and I said, oh, I got to have Alan on the show. But please tell everybody about yourself, man, and you know, how you became a writer and a little bit of your background, if you could.
Yeah, okay. Well, I knew from about 16 that I was going to be a writer, but I was also committed to a lot of causes. And so I decided I'd spend the first half of my life working on homelessness issues and unemployment issues. Mainly, so kind of politically active, but not through parties, but through doing community organizations and building up groups of unemployed people and tenants and people without a tenancy and so on. So it was very I was much more interested in results than in, you know, my side winning and so on. But I was very, you know, very, very committed to that. And as a result, I did all sorts of weird shit. I've ridden with the Grim Reapers, who are a, you know, motorbike gang in New Zealand. Hung out with the mongrel mob. I've stayed in houses where the landlord was going to get heavies to throw the tenants out, and you know, this guy's coming at us with crowbars and baseball bats, and we're sitting inside with baseball bats.
Wow.
That was exciting. That was living. Yeah, and then I became after doing that, I got hired by the government to do two things. This is in New Zealand. One, shut up, and two, write the new tenancy law in New Zealand. So I suddenly, you know, turned my coat and became a public servant and an advisor to government, and continued that in New South Wales, where I am now.
That's fascinating, for sure.
Yeah. And then, you know, time passes, and I thought I better get started on part two of my life. And I was actually writing a book while I was trying, while I was doing, policy advice for government and so on. But basically, you find you can't do two intellectual jobs at once. Really, you come home exhausted, and your writing isn't very good. So in the end, I took redundancy as it when it turned up, and paid off my house and settled down to write. And kind of shortly after that happened, COVID, moved in, and everyone was shut down and shut in, and to some extent shut up. And I decided, right, my project now is to write something that people can read in a hard time, that is actually, kind of positive about people, and that people under stress don't necessarily behave badly, because that's my observation of life. People actually mostly try and look after each other and do their best. So I have a fairly optimistic worldview.
It seems it. You're right.
But you can make a difference. I already know for a fact that you can make a difference, and people just need to be committed to that. And to some extent, that's a theme in every book I've written. That kindness, cleverness, love, and courage, maybe imagination, are better than their opposites. And I don't, they're not message books, but that's a sort of underlying theme behind everything I've written, really. Yeah. So,
and how did you, have you always lived in the kind of remote mountainous area you're in now, or?
Oh no, I left New Zealand, Wellington, New Zealand. That's the political capital of New Zealand, and then moved to Sydney, which is the political capital of New South Wales. And I eventually, I was down at the Opera House, and a couple of, I think, British tourists came up to me and said, "Hey, where's the Southern Cross?" And I looked up, and there was just so much light pollution that you actually can't see it. And that was one of the sort of last straws. I was starting to feel Sydney's too crowded, too dirty,
right,
and so on. And I just thought, right, I'm heading to the mountains. And I've been here about 8 years, something like that. And I love it. I would never move out of the mountains.
Right.
I can go kayaking in the lake. I can go climb down Wentworth Falls, and get as far as the mighty Nepean River, which is, a huge waterway in Australia. Parts of it are called the Hawkesbury, but the place is just beautiful. It's green, it's mountainous. There's waterfalls. There's every damn thing that.
Wow! Yeah, it sounds gorgeous for sure, and I imagine that has to inspire your writing some.
Yeah. Well, if I get stuck with a plot point or whatever, I just go for a walk, and it's never failed. I come back with an answer. So it is literally inspiring.
That's amazing. But I tell you what. Well, let me refill my cocktail, buddy, and when we come back, let's tear into some of your great work. Like I said, I found you and invited you on the show.
Yeah.
Just some of your fascinating work you had stemming from the COVID era, and when we come back, man, let's talk about it.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, just real quick, fast mid-roll break. Look, if you haven't had a chance to check out our other show, After Hours Live, that simulcasts on both X and Rumble, by all means do so. Fun time. Producer Drunk Doug and I and others get together on our back deck. Cocktails, fun conversation as we discuss news and hot topics. So by all means, look, follow us here on X, hit notifications, and also give us a follow on rumble.com/afterhourslive. Check it out. All right, Alan, thanks for hanging with me, buddy. I've refilled up. We're ready to talk about the great work, man, that stemmed from the COVID era. But I tell you what, let's get everybody to know you. You started off with the Lockdown Tales, and why don't you tell us a little bit about it, because it was just fascinating. Like I said, I wanted to have you on the show because it dives deep into how COVID kind of affected everybody while we were.
Yeah, well, basically, the Lockdown Tales is the story of 7 women and 3 men who leave the city to avoid the pandemic. They isolate together in a local farm where they pass the time, working, flirting, eating, drinking, making music. And it's agreed that every Friday they'll get together and tell stories. And that's actually the framework used in Boccaccio's Decameron, written in 1353. And he wrote it just a couple of years after the Black Plague went through Florence and killed a hell of a lot of people. And so, 700 years later, we're in the same, we found ourselves in a similar situation. People are dying. My stories are, I've stolen this framework, but the stories are all new, but maybe I've kept the attitude, which is, his book, though it's set in a really hard time, and it begins with a thing that he calls the proem, which is a description of, the impact of the plague on Florence. Most of the stories are, cheerful, they're bawdy, they're, a bit sexy, they're satirical, especially about people in power and, priests and so on. I don't do much priest whacking, but I'm definitely, it's definitely not that in favor of people who are, running the place. And the stories are sometimes funny, sometimes sad, and they are a celebration of human cleverness, love, courage, and imagination. So there they are.
And what made you decide? To focus on that?
Well, I started writing it in March 2020, when it was obvious that for the foreseeable future I'd be spending a lot of time shut down and shut in. I wanted to write a book that draws on the ways that people have found to live through pandemics before, and to show that there are things worth holding on to and things worth letting go. So it's about people getting together and telling each other stories. So the first priority is that they should be good stories. So I had to come up to emulate Boccaccio, to compete with one of the great writers of all time. I had to come up with 100 stories, 2 volumes, 50 in each. And they're there's stories like the one where Bertrand Russell meets the ghost of Lao Tse at a Chinese customs post. Most of them are in a realist framework, but realism is not the same as despair. You can say, okay, things are tough, but you can also say, and people are coping, mostly, and people are looking out for each other, mostly. So it was written sort of as a kind of a gift to everyone else. I mean, that sounds arrogant, but basically it was written for other people who are shut down and shut in, and to give them something to read, and 2, to talk directly about the situation that they're in, and show, and just demonstrate how sad things happen, but also good things happen, even in hard times.
Well, that's what fascinated me about the work was, from a literature perspective, you worked hard, obviously, because as an author, not only did you have to have the framework of the story, but you also had to make up the stories that they were telling, the tales that they were telling, and and so and have that juxtaposition between what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and what everybody was going through. So I just found it very, very fascinating, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, the characters, in a way, helped create their stories, because you're thinking, because there's a theme for each day's stories, like love, disobedience, escape, and so on, deceit. So each day's stories has a theme, and so you've got 10 characters who are telling stories, and you think, what would that particular person want to say, want to tell, on that theme, and that actually helped helped come up with the stories. Basically, I'd go for a walk in the bush, we call it in Australia. You'd call it forest, I guess. And I forgot to mention 7 of the world's 10 deadliest animals live around here.
Oh, nice.
So you wear, mostly snakes. You wear boots when you go for a walk, but that's life. I used to be phobic about snakes, and since living up here, I've just relaxed about it. They're there, I'm here. We don't really want to meet each other.
Right.
So you're not silly. You're not gonna get bitten. Anyway, but I'd go for a walk and I'd come back with a story, and then start writing it. So
that's amazing. Sure.
Yeah.
And then you and once you when you finished that work, what did you do to get it out there and start? I mean, because obviously we're talking about the timeliness of COVID and the lockdowns all during that period and stuff. What do what did you consider your plan for it?
Well, I did 2 things. There was there were sort of online sales through Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and where all good books are sold, you will find a copy of the Lockdown Tales and the Lockdown Tales-Emergence. And I promise you, I've read that damn book more than anybody else in the universe, more than anyone should have to read anything. And I still actually find that I bits of it will make me laugh, or make me angry, or make me sad. It's still alive. So after the 5th reading, probably.
And you mentioned the Lockdown Tales-Emergence, which of course is the second book in the. Why don't you tell us about that and where you decided to go?
Yeah, well, there's a bit more. It's in some ways darker, because by then people have been on the farm for much longer than I expected they would be. And one relationship founders, breaks up. The husband goes back to Sydney. But on the other hand, there's a woman who's been mourning her brother who died early in the pandemic, and she at least meets a nice Indian archaeologist who's working in Australia as a fruit picker, but that's what happens. So there's a bit more about the stress that the people are under, but it's still still in the end, people manage to hang on to each other, and they pull each other through. Giving away the plot, sorry. And the stories, some of them go a bit deeper and darker, but there's also a lot of good comedy. And I should mention that every day one story directly is set in Boccaccio's time for no real reason. I just set it as a so there's one direct imitation of Boccaccio on each day's stories, and each person does. So 10 people tell stories. Each person has one Boccaccio imitation that they have to do. So those tend to be comedies, and eventually the people start using the stories to tell each other things, about the relationships that they're in, about what's stressing them out, about what's making them happy. The stories are actually, they're about the characters in the story, but they're also about the people who is the person who's telling the story and the 9 people who are listening to it. So yeah, the volume 2 is arguably deeper than volume 1, but that's just going to happen because a situation goes on, and people find it harder to stay together and so on, cope.
That's why when you said you didn't want to give away the plot line, but no, I tell you, the character development and delving into things as the stories unfold, I don't think you have a problem so much with coughing up a little bit in the plot, because it really is. And like I said, I was fascinated by your work and wanted to have you on for sure, Alan. And and I'm glad we could get your internet connection up in the beautiful mountains of New Zealand and
New South Wales, but I'm an exile.
There you go. Well, Alan, ladies and gentlemen, please, everybody, the links will be in the description for the show. Check out Alan's work. Of course, we have the Lockdown Tales, as well as we also have his follow-up, the Lockdown Tales-Emergence. Really, really fascinating work. Check out the links. Go check out Alan. Give him a follow on X, obviously. You want to tell everybody your screen name on...
it's Alan N. Whelan. And no offense to Elon, but I still call it Twitter.
There you go. But give him a follow. Look, and I tell you what, and I'm sure you have any before we close, Alan, do you have any scoop for Cocktails with Cav? Ooh, got anything else in the pipe we should know about?
Well, I'm writing a historical adventure novel at the moment. It's set in 1880, and it stars most of the cast are real historical people. The narrator is Frank Harris, who was a writer, an adventurer, womanizer, and notorious liar, who was around at that time. And it deals with 2 things. It deals with the people who are in exile in London, because there were a lot of revolutions in Europe, and as a result, not many governments got changed, but a lot of people finished up with death sentences and jail terms on their heads. So they all escaped to London, where they had a horrible time because the British don't care about politics, and the food is terrible, and so they're all stuck there. There's a duel between Karl Marx and the leader of the French anarchists. Pistols at door. Which escapes history for reasons you're going to have to read the book to find out.
That's right.
I won't. I'm not giving that one away. I did a lot of research on pistol duels with the guy who is the kind of armorer for Purdy's, who made the 19th century dueling pistols, and there's a solution where the 2 characters get out, alive, and the bullets. Well, anyway, not going to tell you that, but he thought that was pretty bloody ingenious.
That's right. I'm telling you, people get ready
look
for that.
That
sounds like a fascinating story too.
Yeah.
But again, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, please check the links in the description. Give Alan a visit, give him a follow on X, but check out his 2 wonderful books. Like I said, the reason I asked him on the show, the Lockdown Tales, and as well the follow-up, the Lockdown Tales-Emergence. So, Alan, I can't thank you enough, buddy, for taking the time out of your busy morning over there.
Cheers to you. Cheers to the city of New Orleans. I'll go and play some Army Guthrie shortly.
We're working on it. We have drive-through alcohol shops, so we're going for it. No.
Yeah, good. All right.
Oh, well, Alan, again, my friend, cheers.
Yep, cheers to you. And yeah, I've enjoyed it.